There were more than 100,000 people at the Crystal Palace that afternoon. Not one of them saw a murder. Also, you can enjoy all of my stories on Spotify. The link will be in the description. They saw the winning goal. They saw the ball squirm low across the mud and creep beneath the keeper's hands, and they rose as a single creature and roared until the very timbers of the stand trembled. In that roar, a man died, quietly, in the dark beneath their feet, and the sound of his dying was swallowed whole. When the crowd went home, the passage fell silent. The gas lamps hissed. The fog came up off the lake and moved between the towers of the great glass palace like something searching, and a groundsman with a bucket found what the roar had hidden. I have set down many of the cases of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I have written of poisons and of ciphers, of hounds upon the moor, and of men who were not what they seemed. But I have never written of a killing so brazen, nor so patient, as the one that waited for 100,000 throats to open before it struck. Holmes said afterward that it was the finest alibi he had ever met. Not a false witness, not a forged letter, a crowd. The killer did not hide from the eyes of the world. He simply chose the one moment when the whole world was looking somewhere else. You will meet the man who did it before I tell you his name. You will hear him speak. He will help us. He will grieve. And when you know the truth, you will go back over every word he said, and you will find, sitting there in plain sight, the two small mistakes that hanged him. To understand how a man was murdered in front of 100,000 witnesses, we must go back 3 days. Back before the final. Back to a grey morning in Baker Street, when Sherlock Holmes was bored, and boredom, in that man, was the most dangerous condition of all. Sherlock Holmes had not spoken in 2 hours. He lay in his chair with his eyes half closed and his fingertips pressed together, and about him hung the particular gloom that settled on him whenever London refused to be interesting. The morning papers lay unread. A week had passed without a single problem worthy of his attention, and I had learned to fear these fallow weeks more than any crisis. "You are looking at the mantelpiece again, Watson," he said, without opening his eyes. I confess I was. I said nothing, but I moved to the window instead, and I made a show of interest in the street below, where a newsboy was crying the afternoon's great event to anyone who would listen. "The whole city has gone mad for a football match," I said. "You can hardly move for it. Every public house, every counting house, every drawing room, they say there will be more than 100,000 at the Crystal Palace on Saturday. People are travelling down from the north in their thousands. The papers are calling it the whole world's cup of football." 22 men chasing a leather ball across a field, Holmes murmured, while 100,000 others watch them do it, and you wonder that I keep to my chair. But here is the thing about my friend. He would tell you he had no interest in the match, and it would be true. Yet even as he said it, his eyes had opened, and they had fixed on the newsboy, and behind them, the machine had already begun to turn. 100,000 people, he said slowly, in one place. Think of it, Watson. Not an army, which is drilled and counted and known. A crowd. A single animal with 100,000 hearts and no memory. Each man in it believes himself a witness to everything. In truth, he sees only what the man beside him sees, and remembers only what he is told to remember afterward. He sat up. A crowd is the most watched place on earth, and the blindest. I have often thought that if a clever man wished to do a wicked thing, he could do no better than to do it in the middle of a multitude. I did not know then how those words would return to me. It was at that moment that Mrs. Hudson knocked and brought up a card, and with it a note. Holmes read the card, and his eyebrow rose a fraction, which in him was the equivalent of another man leaping from his seat. "Edmund Vane," he read aloud. "The name means nothing to you, Watson, and everything to half of London. He is the largest bookmaker in the country. Horses, prize fights, and lately, football. If a wager can be laid on it, Vane holds the book, and he has written to ask whether I will do him the honor of attending the final on Saturday as his personal guest. A bookmaker inviting you to a football match, I said. Whatever for? He does not say. He says only that he would be grateful for my company and that he believes I would find the occasion instructive. Holmes turned the note over. A man does not spend a stamp on Sherlock Holmes because he wishes company at the football. He is afraid of something. Read the hand, Watson. The letters are firm, but the line wanders at the end of each word, as if written by a man whose attention keeps sliding away from the page to the door. He set it down. Mr. Vane is frightened. And a frightened bookmaker is a very interesting thing indeed, because a bookmaker, of all men, is paid to be afraid of nothing. Therefore we went, not for the football, which Holmes still professed to despise, but for the fear in a rich man's handwriting. And I will tell you now, because it matters, that we very nearly did not go at all. Holmes almost sent his regrets. Had he done so, Edmund Vane would still have died. But the man who killed him would have walked free into the crowd and out of history, and no one would ever have known that a murder had been done. That is how close it ran. Saturday came grey and warm, with a low sky that would not quite decide to rain. We took the train south with half of London, packed shoulder to shoulder with men in their best coats and rosettes of blue for Camberwell and gold for Brackenmore. And as we came over the last rise, the Crystal Palace stood up against the clouds, that vast cathedral of iron and glass, and below it the great bowl of the ground, already black with people 2 hours before the whistle. Holmes looked out at it for a long time. 100,000 alibis, Watson, he said quietly, all standing in a row. He said it as a joke. Neither of us was laughing by the end of the day. I have stood in crowds before. I stood at Maiwand, with the guns going, and I have known the press of a London theatre on a first night. I had never in my life stood in anything like the Crystal Palace on the day of that final. It was not a crowd, it was a landscape. It moved and breathed and murmured, and when it laughed, the sound rolled around the great bowl of the ground like weather. We were met at the members' entrance by a small, neat man in a grey frock coat, who introduced himself as Mr. Aldous Finch, Mr. Vane's partner and man of business. Mr. Holmes, Doctor, you are most welcome, said Finch with a bow. Mr. Vane is detained a moment with the stewards, some tiresome business with the gate receipts, but he asked me to bring you up. He will be so glad you came. He has been, if I may say it, not quite himself these last few days. In what way, not himself? Said Holmes. Finch hesitated and touched his watch chain, nervous, watchful. He starts at shadows, which is not like him at all. Between ourselves, gentlemen, I think this match has got into his blood. There is a great deal riding on it, a very great deal. He smiled, a small, tidy smile. But then, in our trade, there always is. Remember Aldous Finch. Remember that he was kind to us and helpful, and that he touched his watch chain when he spoke of time. It will matter. It will matter more than anything else in this story. We were given seats in the second row of the members' stand, high above the halfway line, with a clear view of the whole field. Vane's own seat was beside us, empty still, his coat folded over the back of it, and his field glasses resting on the folded coat. Finch sat on Holmes's other side, and below us, and around us, and above us to the very lip of the great bowl, the 100,000 waited. "Tell me about the match, Mr. Finch," said Holmes, who cared nothing for the match, and therefore wished to hear everything about it. "I am an ignorant man in these matters." Finch was glad to. Brackenmore United, he explained, were the favourites, a hard northern club, champions 2 years running, and the whole weight of the betting was upon them. Camberwell Rovers were the local side, South London men, brave and quick but lightly fancied. The bookmakers had them at long odds. "Nobody of sense backs Camberwell," said Finch, "which is precisely why, if a man wished to win a fortune, he would back Camberwell." He said it lightly. Holmes did not appear to notice. I saw later that Holmes noticed everything. Then Edmund Vane arrived, and I saw for the first time the man who would be dead before the sun set. He was a big man gone slightly soft, dressed like a duke, with a voice that could fill a betting ring. But his eyes betrayed him. They went constantly to the crowd, to the entrances, to the faces near him, as if he were counting a debt that kept coming out wrong. He shook Holmes's hand too hard and held it too long. "Mr. Holmes, you came. Good, good." He lowered his voice, though the roar would have hidden a cannon. "I'll be honest with you, sir, for I've no time to be otherwise. I think a man means to ruin me today. Perhaps worse than ruin me. I can't prove it. I can't take it to the police. They'd laugh. But I've been in this trade 30 years, and I know when the book is wrong. The money has come in strange these last 2 weeks. Too much on the wrong side, and it's come in quiet, through names I don't know, in amounts no honest man lays." He wiped his lip. "If Camberwell win today, someone stands to take £100,000 off me, and I do not believe it will be luck that wins it." "You believe the match is fixed?" said Holmes. "I believe," said Vane, "that I have been robbed, and that I am standing in the room while it happens, and I cannot see the hand." He looked at Holmes with something close to pleading. "After the match, sir. Give me an hour after the match. I'll lay the whole book in front of you, every strange wager, every name. You'll see it plain, I know you will. Just, not now, not here. Watch the game with me first. Tell me I'm a foolish old man frightened of his own shadow." "I will watch the game," said Holmes. "And then, Mr. Vane, I will tell you the truth, whatever it is." He never got the chance. That was the last full conversation Edmund Vane had with anyone but his killer. I will not pretend to give you the football, for I am no judge of it, and Holmes judged it not at all. He spent the first half watching the crowd and not the pitch, his glasses trained on the entrances, on the members' stand, on the faces around us. Vane grew quieter and paler as the minutes passed. Brackenmore, the favourites, pressed and did not score. "Something in their play was wrong," Finch murmured. "They were sluggish. Their young goalkeeper, up the other end, looked half asleep." For all his talk of caring nothing for the game, Holmes had not lowered his glasses once. He was not watching the ball. He swept the members' stand, row by row, and the great banks of the terraces, and the mouths of the passages where the stewards stood, the way a man reads a page he expects to find a misprint upon. Once he stopped, and held the glasses quite still on some point below us, and to the left, where the wooden stair went down into the belly of the stand, and I felt him go tense at my side. Then, whatever it was passed, and he lowered the glasses an inch, and said, so quietly that only I could hear it, 100,000 people, Watson, and every one of them looking at the same small patch of grass. If a man wished to move about this ground unseen, he would not hide at all. He would simply walk where no eye happens to fall, which today is everywhere but the ball. Beside me, Vane had stopped speaking altogether. He sat forward with his big hands gripping the rail, and the sweat stood on his forehead, though the day was not warm, and his eyes went again and again to the stair his partner had gone down. Twice he half rose, as if to follow, and twice he sat again, held by some last unwillingness to seem a frightened old fool before Sherlock Holmes. I have wondered many times since what he was afraid of in those last minutes, and whether some animal part of him already knew and could not make itself believe that the danger he had felt for a fortnight was waiting for him now at the bottom of a wooden stair, wearing the face of the man he trusted most in all the world. Camberwell hung on, and the local crowd began to believe. And then it came. The 44th minute of the second half. I have gone over it 100 times since, and I will give it to you exactly as it happened, because you must see it as clearly as the 100,000 saw it. The shot was a poor one, a hopeful thing from 20 yards, skidding low along the wet ground. It struck a defender's heel and deflected, and it did not rise. It crawled, slow and ugly and unstoppable, straight at the Brackenmore goalkeeper, who went down for it a fraction late, and it squirmed beneath his body and over the line. For one heartbeat, the whole ground was silent, and then 100,000 people came to their feet at once and made a sound I have never heard before or since. It was not a cheer, it was the ground itself crying out. It went on, and the timbers of the stand shook under our boots, and the water in the great fountains trembled, and you could not hear the man screaming beside you. The clock in the members' stand stood at 7 minutes before 5, 47 minutes past 4. Fix that time in your mind, as Holmes fixed it, though he did not yet know why. At 47 minutes past 4, a low deflected shot crept under a diving goalkeeper, and 100,000 people roared, and in that roar, Edmund Vane died in the dark beneath their feet. Now I must go back a few minutes, to a thing I barely noticed at the time, and which I have never forgiven myself for not noticing more. Perhaps 20 minutes before the goal, while Brackenmore were pressing and the crowd was on its feet, a steward climbed to our row and handed Edmund Vane a folded note. Vane read it. I saw the colour go out of his face. He muttered something to Finch about the gate money coming up short and a man he had to see at once, and he rose, and he went down the wooden stair into the belly of the stand, and he did not come back. I thought nothing of it. A bookmaker on the biggest day of his year has 100 small crises, and a few minutes later, when the pressing grew desperate and Brackenmore won a corner, Finch too excused himself. He would go down, he said, and see that Mr. Vane was not fretting himself into an apoplexy over the receipts. He touched his watch chain, and he smiled his tidy smile, and he went down the same stair. And so it happened that when the low shot crept beneath the goalkeeper and the ground erupted, neither Edmund Vane nor Aldous Finch was in his seat, and I, God help me, was on my feet, with 100,000 others, roaring at a ball. The match ended a quarter of an hour later. Camberwell had won, 1 goal to nothing, the greatest upset the competition had known. The crowd began its slow flood toward the gates, 100,000 men churning the wet ground to black soup as they went. And it was in the middle of that flood, in the service passage beneath the members' stand, that a groundsman named Pettigrew went to fetch a barrow and lifted his lantern and found Mr. Edmund Vane lying on his back in the dark with his eyes open. Finch found us in the emptying stand and brought us the news, white to the lips, his voice unsteady. "It is Mr. Vane," he said. "They have found him below. Mr. Holmes, for God's sake, come. I think he is dead. Oh God, I think someone has killed him." Holmes was down the stair before Finch had finished speaking. I have seen my friend at many scenes of death, and I have never seen him quicker to one than he was that evening. We came into the passage, low and close under the timbers, lit by that one swinging lantern, and there lay Edmund Vane. He lay on his back upon the beaten earth. His coat was pulled open and his pockets had been turned out and hung inside out like the ears of a hound. His watch chain dangled empty, the watch torn from it. A little blood had darkened the earth beneath his head, and on his throat, half hidden by his collar, were the marks I had come to know too well in my work, the deep bruises of a strong pair of thumbs. "Strangled," I said, "from the front. A powerful man, or a determined one. He has been robbed, Holmes. Watch and money both gone. Some brute followed him down here for his purse and throttled him for it in the crush." "Has he?" said Holmes. He was not looking at the throat. He was looking at the boots. Watson, you are a doctor. Tell me when this man died. I did my work, and my work troubled me, and I will tell you honestly that I did not understand what it was telling me until much later. That is the strange thing, I said. By the cooling and the stiffness, he has been dead longer than he ought to be. If he died in the crush after the final whistle, 20 minutes past 5, he should be barely cool. But he is well on his way to cold, Holmes, and the stiffness has begun in the jaw already. I would swear he has been dead the better part of an hour, which cannot be right, for the match only ended a quarter hour ago. It is exactly right, said Holmes softly. Look at his boots, Watson. He turned the sole to the light. The passage floor is black mud, churned to soup by 100,000 feet leaving the ground. Every man who walked here in the last half hour carries it up to his ankles. My own boots are filthy with it. Yours are. But Mr. Vane's boots are dry. The dirt on them is pale and old, the dry dust of the ground as it was this afternoon, before the crowd churned it. This man did not walk down here in the flood after the match, when the floor was wet. He walked down here while the floor was still dry. He came down here during the match, and he has been lying here dead ever since. I knelt then, in the wet, and looked for myself, for I did not wish to believe a thing so strange on any word but the evidence of my own eyes. I set my thumb to the leather, and it came away pale, a fine grey powder like flour, the dust of a dry afternoon. I looked at my own boots, thick with black slime to the lace, and at the churned floor that had wetted them, and I understood that the two could not have shared this passage in the same half hour. The dead man's feet had never touched the mud that soaked mine. He had come down before it was made. I felt the cold of it move up my spine. Then he did not die in the crush at all. He died, said Holmes, at the height of the match. He died, I should judge, at the very moment the crowd roared loudest, which is the only moment in a whole afternoon when a man might be strangled 10 feet from 100,000 people and not one of them hear him cry out. He rose. This was not a robbery, Watson. A robber takes the watch and runs. He does not lay the body out on its back and fold the hands. He does not choose the one instant of maximum noise in a 5-hour day. The watch and the purse are gone to make us say the word robbery and think no further. Someone wished this man dead, wished it carefully, and used 100,000 throats to cover the sound of his dying. Holmes went over the earth about the body with the lantern held low, and I watched him gather a dozen small things that the word robbery would have swept away unnoticed. The ground beside the dead man was scuffed and dragged, he showed me, but only in a short arc, as though the body had been turned and laid out rather than dropped in a struggle and left. A man throttled and robbed in a hurry falls where he is throttled and lies as he falls, said Holmes. This man has been arranged. His arms were placed at his sides. His coat was opened, not torn. See how the pockets are pulled out evenly, the left and the right alike, the work of a careful hand at its leisure, and not a thief's snatch in the dark. A robber wants the purse, and is gone in 3 heartbeats. This man's murderer had time, a great deal of time, and used every minute of it making the scene tell a lie. He lifted the dead man's right hand into the light. On the least finger was a heavy gold ring, and Holmes turned it so that the lantern caught the gleam of it. And here is the lie caught in its own mouth. A thief who tore a watch from its chain and turned out both pockets, left a gold ring worth more than the watch upon the victim's own hand. He left it because he was no thief, and cared nothing for the gold, and thought only of the story he was telling. He forgot that a true robber would never have been so tidy, nor so blind to a ring. It was at that moment that Inspector Lestrade arrived, having been fetched from the ground where he had been on duty for the crowds, and Lestrade, as ever, already knew everything. "A bad business, Mr. Holmes, but a plain one," said Lestrade, rubbing his hands. "Rich bookmaker, comes down alone into a dark passage on the busiest day of the year, gets throttled for his watch and his wallet. London is full of men who do it. We'll have the fellow by morning." He looked down at the body with satisfaction. Robbery, plain as day. "Plain as day," Holmes agreed pleasantly, and I saw the ghost of a smile touch his mouth, and I knew that Lestrade had just made the first of the many mistakes that would let the truth escape into the dark, if Holmes did not run it down. The next morning, before the papers had finished shouting the news, a young woman came to Baker Street. She wore black already, and she carried herself with the terrible straightness of someone who has decided not to weep in front of strangers. This was Miss Cordelia Vane, the dead man's only child. "They are saying my father was robbed and murdered by some thief in the crowd," she said, and her voice did not shake, which was worse than if it had. "Inspector Lestrade came to our house this morning and told me so to my face, as though it were a comfort. Mr. Holmes, I do not believe it. My father was afraid of something for a fortnight before he died, afraid, and my father feared nothing on this earth. He slept badly. He kept looking at the door. 3 nights ago, I heard him in his study very late, and when I went down he was burning papers, and he would not tell me what they were. That is not a man about to be killed by chance for his watch. That is a man who saw it coming." "Tell me about your father's business, Miss Vane," said Holmes gently. "Spare nothing. The truth does not injure the dead, but a comfortable lie may let their killer go free." She told us, and I will set it down plainly. Edmund Vane had built the largest bookmaking house in England out of nothing. He had begun as a tout at country racecourses and ended holding the book on everything from the Derby to the prize fight to, in these last years, the new fever for football. His firm was Vane and Finch. Aldous Finch had come to him as a clerk 20 years before, clever with figures, quiet, tireless, and had risen to junior partner. Finch ran the ledgers and the daily working of the book. Vane ran the men and the money. Between them they had made a fortune. "And in the last weeks," said Holmes, "something in the book went wrong." "You know already," she said, surprised. "Your father wrote it in his hand before he ever spoke it. Go on." "The money came in strange," he said. "Great sums laid on Camberwell to win the final, which no sensible person expected. It came in through names he did not know, in careful amounts, spread across many books, so that no single bookmaker would take fright. But my father saw the shape of it, because he saw all the books, or nearly. He said someone was building a mountain of money on the long shot, and a man does not build a mountain on a long shot unless he knows a thing the rest of us do not." She looked up. "He thought the match was to be fixed, Mr. Holmes, and he thought whoever had fixed it meant to bleed him white." "Did your father name anyone? Did he speak of a single wager, larger than the rest, a single name?" She hesitated, and reached into her bag, and drew out a slip of paper, folded small. "I found this in the lining of his coat this morning, when they gave me his things back. The watch is gone, and the money, but they missed this, sewn into the lining where he kept things he did not trust to a drawer. I cannot make sense of it. Perhaps you can." Holmes read it and went very still. It was a bookmaker's counterfoil, a record of a single accepted wager. The sum upon it made me draw breath. It was a wager of a size to ruin any but the very greatest house, laid upon Camberwell Rovers to win the final. And it was laid in the name of one H. Sable. "H. Sable," said Holmes. "Miss Vane, does that name mean anything to you? A client of your father's? A friend? An enemy?" "Nothing," she said. "I never heard it in my life." "No," said Holmes, half to himself, turning the slip to the light. "I do not think H. Sable is a person at all. I think H. Sable is a door, painted to look like a wall, and behind it stands the man we want." He folded the slip and put it away with great care. This, Miss Vane, is the most valuable thing anyone has given me in a 12-month. A true robber would have taken it, for it is a promise of a great sum of money. It was left because the man who arranged your father's death did not know it existed, sewn in the lining where even your father half hid it from himself. Guard the fact that you gave it to me. Tell no one you found it. Not the police, not your father's friends, not Mr. Finch. No one. Not Mr. Finch? But Mr. Finch has been so very kind. He came to me last night, before even the police, and sat with me an hour, and promised he would see the murderer hanged if it cost him his last penny. He was my father's partner 20 years. Surely he, of anyone, we may trust. I am sure you are right, said Holmes smoothly. I ask it only from habit. In a matter of murder, Miss Vane, I trust no one until the figures balance, and just now the figures do not balance at all. Tell me, before you go, who hated your father? Give me every name, the angry, the ruined, the jealous. I want all of them, so that I may begin the slow work of setting them aside. She gave them, and I wrote them down, and they are the men you must now hold in your mind, for the next days of the case were spent among them. There was Ned Corbett, a clerk her father had dismissed and ruined a year before, a man who had stood outside the Vane house and shouted that he would see Edmund Vane in his grave. There was Silas Grime, a rival bookmaker, who had lost half his trade to Vane and hated him with a cold and public hatred. There was a young journalist named Thomas Wren, who had been courting Cordelia against her father's furious refusal, and who had been sniffing about the firm, asking dangerous questions for a story. And there was, though she named him last and lightly, and only because Holmes pressed her for every name, Mr. Aldous Finch, the faithful partner, who touched his watch-chain when he spoke of time, and who had been so very kind. 4 men who had reason to wish him gone, said Holmes when she had left, standing at the window, watching her cab pull away into the rain. One of them did it, Watson, and the one who did it will be, I promise you, the one who has been kindest of all. Murderers of this careful sort do not shout in the street like poor Corbett. They sit an hour with the grieving daughter, and they promise to spend their last penny hanging themselves. By noon the next day, Inspector Lestrade had his man, and the papers had their villain, and all of London slept easier. The man was Ned Corbett. You will remember him from Cordelia Vane's list. A year before, he had been a clerk in Vane's counting house, and Vane had dismissed him for an error in the books, a shortfall of some £40, and had done it without mercy, blacking his name so that no other firm would take him. Corbett had sunk, his wife had left him, and a month before the murder he had stood outside the Vane house in the rain, drunk and weeping, and shouted for all the street to hear that he would live to see Edmund Vane cold in the ground. It was, Lestrade explained to us with enormous satisfaction, an open and shut case. Corbett had threatened the man. Corbett had been seen at the Crystal Palace on the day of the final, in the crowd. Corbett had no money for a ticket, yet there he was. And Corbett, when they came for him, had bolted from his lodging-house and been caught climbing out of a back window. "Guilt, Mr. Holmes," said Lestrade, beaming. "Guilt in every line of him." "Perhaps," said Holmes, "I should like to speak with him, if you will permit it." Corbett was in a state near madness. "I never touched him," he said, over and over. "As God is my witness, I hated him, I wished him dead 1,000 times, but I never laid a finger on him. Yes, I was at the palace. Where else would a ruined man go on the one day the whole city is out and a man might slip through a gate in the crush without paying? I went to be among people, sir, because my own room is a coffin. I never went near him. I did not even know he was there until I heard the newsboys crying it this morning." "Tell me exactly where you were," said Holmes, at the moment Camberwell scored, the moment of the great roar. Think carefully, Mr. Corbett. Your neck may hang upon the answer, and the truth of it will save you far better than any lie you could invent." "The goal?" said Corbett. "Why, I was on the open terrace at the Camberwell end, packed in with 10,000 others, at the far side of the whole ground from the members' stand. When the ball went in, I was carried clean off my feet, sir, lifted up bodily by the crowd, and I came down 3 steps below where I'd stood. There were men all round me who'll swear to it, if they can be found. A fat man in a green muffler had his arm round my neck and wept on my collar like a baby. The whole terrace went over like a wave. He laughed, a broken sound. I could no more have been under the members' stand throttling Edmund Vane than I could have been on the moon." Holmes questioned him for an hour, minutely, about the crowd, the fat man in the green muffler, the exact steps he had been carried down, the gate he had slipped through and at what hour. And when he had finished, he sat quite still for a time. Then he said, "Thank you, Mr. Corbett. You have told me the truth, and the truth has done for you what you could not do for yourself." He rose. "You did not kill Edmund Vane, and I shall prove it." Outside the cell, Lestrade was less pleased. He hated the man. He threatened the man. He was there, with no ticket and no honest reason. "What more do you want, Mr. Holmes?" "I want the geography of it, Lestrade," said Holmes. "Consider, Vane died at 47 minutes past 4, at the instant of the goal. I know the hour to a certainty, and I will tell you how another day. At that same instant, your murderer was on the open Camberwell terrace, at the very opposite end of the ground, being carried 3 steps down a heaving bank of 10,000 men, with a weeping stranger's arm about his neck. The Crystal Palace ground is 1/4 of a mile from end to end. No man living could be lifted off his feet in a crowd at the Camberwell end, and, in the same breath, be strangling a man in the members' passage 1/4 mile away. Your case does not fail for want of motive. It fails for want of a man who can be in 2 places at once." "Then find me the men on the terrace who saw him," said Lestrade, nettled. "The fat man in the green muffler, 10,000 faces. Good luck to you." And that, I confess, seemed to me a fair objection, and for a day it stopped us cold. How do you prove where one man stood in a crowd of 10,000 strangers, none of whom knew his name, all of whom had gone home? Holmes did it in a way so simple that I was ashamed not to have thought of it. The newspapers had sent photographers to the final. 6 of them, with their great cameras, had stood on the running track and photographed the crowd at the very moment of the goal, for the crowd's joy was as much the story as the goal itself. Holmes gathered every plate he could buy or borrow, and he and I spent a long evening under a magnifying glass, quartering the Camberwell terrace inch by inch. And there, in the 3rd plate, near the bottom of the terrace, 3 steps lower than the men about him, his mouth open in a shout, his thin face unmistakable even in the grain, stood Ned Corbett. And with his arm flung about Corbett's neck, weeping into his collar exactly as Corbett had described, was a fat man in a light muffler that even the grey photograph showed to be a paler shade than the rest. "There is your murderer, Lestrade," said Holmes dryly, "captured in the very act of being throttled by joy at the wrong end of the ground. Let the poor devil go. He has been ruined once by Edmund Vane's cruelty. Do not let him be hanged by Vane's death as well." Corbett was released that afternoon, and he wept again, and this time no one held his neck. But as we left the police station, Holmes was not triumphant. He was grim. "We have taken away Lestrade's murderer," he said, "and given him nothing in its place, and that is a dangerous thing to do. For the true murderer is a patient and a careful man, and while all London believed the case was solved, he could rest easy. Now he will know that Sherlock Holmes has unpicked it. Now he will begin to be afraid. And a careful man who is afraid, Watson, is a man who will move again to protect himself. He looked out at the grey street. Somewhere in this city tonight, our killer has read the evening paper. And somewhere in this city tonight, someone else is in danger because of what they know and do not even know they know. We must be quick. We have pulled the thread. Now we shall see what unravels, and pray it is not another life. To find H. Sable, Holmes had to go into the book, and to go into the book, he had to go through Aldous Finch, for Finch now held the whole business in his careful hands. We called at the offices of Vane and Finch the following morning. Finch received us at once, in his shirt sleeves, ledgers open all about him, a man drowning in the labour of a dead partner's estate, and bearing it, he wished us to see, with weary courage. "Mr. Holmes, doctor, you find me at my wit's end," he said, rising to shake our hands. 30 years of Edmund's affairs to be untangled, and half of it in his own head, which is gone now, and the police thundering in and out, and poor Miss Vane to be looked after. Sit, please. Whatever I can do to help you find the devil who did this, you have only to name it. I have already told the girl I will spend my last penny to see him hanged. You are very good, said Holmes. Perhaps you can begin by telling me what you yourself saw and did on the day. You went down from the stand a few minutes after Mr. Vane, if you recall. You said you would see he did not fret over the receipts. I did, yes. I went down to the passage below the stand, where the office of the day's receipts was kept. But Edmund was not there. The clerk said he had gone on to meet some man about a wager, and I thought little of it. Edmund was always meeting men about wagers. I waited a little, then I went to the refreshment room and took a glass of soda water, for the day was warm and my nerves were bad. And then I heard the roar, and I hurried back up the stair to the stand to see the finish. Here it comes. Watch closely. This is one of the 2 mistakes I promised you. I was only just in time, Finch went on, and for a moment his weariness lifted, and something like real feeling came into his voice. I came back to my seat as the ball went in. I shall remember it to my dying day, Mr. Holmes. The Camberwell forward rose above the whole defence and headed it down into the corner, a header of pure beauty, and the ground went up like the crack of doom. To think that while that lovely thing was happening, poor Edmund was already lying dead below our feet. He shook his head, moved. I saw the goal that ruined him and killed him in the same breath, and I never knew it. I noticed nothing. I sat there, and I felt sorry for the man. But Holmes, beside me, had gone very slightly still, the way a cat goes still, and I knew afterward that in that instant Aldous Finch had, without the least idea of it, told my friend a lie so complete that it would end by hanging him. He said nothing. He let it pass. He filed it away in that terrible cold storehouse of a mind, and he moved on as though he had heard nothing at all. A great loss, said Holmes. Now, Mr. Vane feared, in his last days, that a great sum had been laid against him on Camberwell through strange channels. His daughter tells me he even feared the match itself was not honest. As his partner, you would know the book better than any man alive. Was there such a wager? A single great bet on the long shot? Finch spread his hands. There was heavy money on Camberwell, yes, more than the odds warranted. I saw it as Edmund saw it, and it worried me too. But bookmaking is full of fools who love a long shot, Mr. Holmes, and a heavy day on the outsider is not proof of anything but folly. As for the match being fixed, I never believed it, and I told Edmund so. I thought his nerves had got the better of him. I was wrong to be so easy with his fears. I shall carry that too. The largest single wager on Camberwell, Holmes pressed gently. Who laid it? What name? Finch made a show of searching, and I believe now it was a show, for he knew the answer before he opened the book. The largest, he said at last, was laid in the name of a Mr. H. Sable, a new client. He opened an account by letter a month ago, paid a deposit in banknotes, laid a very large sum on Camberwell to win, and gave an address in the city which, I am sorry to say, when a clerk went round to it after Edmund's death, proved to be an empty office let to no one. I have already given this to Inspector Lestrade. It is plainly the man you want, this Sable, whoever he is. He fixed the match, he stood to win a fortune, and when Edmund grew suspicious, he silenced him. Find H. Sable, Mr. Holmes, and you will have your murderer. I only wish I could tell you where to look. He was very good, was Finch. Do you see what he had done? He had handed us the villain himself, gift-wrapped. H. Sable, the mysterious fixer, the empty office, the vanished stranger. A phantom to chase forever. Holmes took the address of the empty office, and thanked him, and asked a dozen more small questions to bury the one that mattered, and we left. Well, I said, there is our man, surely, this Sable. He fixed the match, he stood to win the earth, Vane found him out, and he killed him. Finch has all but drawn us a map. Finch, said Holmes, has drawn us a very beautiful map, Watson, and I do not trust a single road upon it. Consider, H. Sable laid this ruinous bet through the house of Vane and Finch, among others. When the bet is won, who must pay it out? The house. And who now controls the house? Every penny of it, with Vane dead. Aldous Finch. If H. Sable and Aldous Finch were, let us say, for the pleasure of the idea, one and the same man, then Finch would have laid a fortune with his own firm, to be paid out of the firm's money, into his own secret pocket, with the one man who might have stopped him, his partner, conveniently strangled. He would rob the dead man's estate, and call it an honest wager honestly lost. Holmes drew on his pipe. It would be the neatest theft I ever heard of, and the murder would not be a crime of hatred at all. It would be a business expense. But that is monstrous, I said, and it is only a fancy. You have no proof that Sable is Finch. None whatever, Holmes agreed cheerfully. Sable, the name, is nothing but darkness dressed up, sable being the herald's word for black, a small joke of the sort clever men cannot resist. It proves the man has wit, not that he is Finch. No, Watson, I have no proof, and I shall need a great deal, for this is a man who leaves no proof lying about. But I have two small things that Finch does not know I have. I have a betting counterfoil sewn in a dead man's coat, which the killer believed destroyed, and I have a memory of the goal that Camberwell scored. He smiled, and it was not a warm smile. Let us go and look at this empty office, not because I think we shall find H. Sable there, because I think we shall find that H. Sable was never meant to be found there, and the manner of a man's absence can tell you as much as his presence. The office told us exactly what Holmes had expected, which is to say, almost nothing, and the almost was everything. It had been let by letter, paid by banknote, never truly occupied, but in the cold grate, Holmes found the corner of a burnt letter, and on it, unburnt, 3 words in a clerk's neat hand, and the hand was a hand I had seen that very morning, running down the columns of a ledger. I could not swear to it, but Holmes could. Holmes never forgot a hand. He was careful, said Holmes softly, but he was in a hurry once, a month ago, before he knew that Sherlock Holmes would ever look at this grate. And a man in a hurry burns a letter and does not stay to see that every corner is ash. He wrapped the scrap in his handkerchief. It is not proof. A clever counsel would tear it to shreds before a jury, but it is a second thread, Watson, running to the same dark place as the first. And now I think it is time we understood exactly how a football match is bought. For if we can find the man who was paid to lose, we may find, at the other end of the money, the man who paid him. If the match was bought, then somewhere there was a man who had sold it, and Holmes reasoned that such a man would not be hard to find, because such a man cannot hide from himself. "A defender who misplaces a pass may be unlucky," said Holmes. "A goalkeeper who lets a slow shot creep beneath his body, in the final, before 100,000, is either the most wretched player alive or a guilty man. And a guilty man of 20, Watson, who has done a shameful thing for money, does not spend that money. He sits in the dark with it, and it eats him." The goalkeeper's name was Wilfred Tanner. He was 20 years old, a Brackenmore lad, and by every account until that final, he had been a rising wonder, the safest pair of hands in the north. We found him in a cheap room, and he had not shaved, and he had not eaten, and when he opened the door and saw Holmes's card, he did not ask who we were or what we wanted. He simply stood back to let us in, as a man stands back for the men who have come to arrest him, almost with relief. "You've come about the goal," he said. It was not a question. "I have come about a murder," said Holmes gently, "and I do not think you had any part in that, and I want you to hear me say so before you say another word. A man is dead, Wilfred, strangled beneath the stands, while the crowd roared at the goal you let in. I believe the same hand that bought your goal took that man's life. You did a wrong thing. You did not do that. Tell me the truth of the smaller wrong, and you may help me undo the greater one." It came out of him then in a flood, as such things do, and I set it down as near as I can remember, for it moved me more than I expected. "My father's a joiner in Brackenmore," he said. "He went surety on his brother's shop, and the brother died, and the debt came down on my father, £90, more money than he'll see in 10 years. They were to take the house, my mother's house, that she was born in. And I'm the one earns, sir. I'm the great football man. Only a player earns nothing, not really. A few shillings and your name in the paper. And then a man came to me, 3 weeks before the final. Very quiet, very pleasant. Knew all about my father's debt, more than I knew. Said there were gentlemen in London who'd make it all go away, the whole £90, if I'd do one small thing that no one would ever know, that couldn't be proved, that everybody would call bad luck. "Let a goal in," said Holmes. "One goal," Tanner whispered. "Not lose on purpose." He was very clear on that. Nothing so crude, the lads would smell it. Just, if a shot came low to my right in the second half, to go down a half-second slow and let it under me, make it look like a slip in the mud. One shot, 1/2 second, £90, and my mother keeps her house. He put his face in his hands, and God help me I did it. The shot came, that ugly slow thing off Harker's heel, and I saw it all the way. I could have had it in my sleep, and I let my hands go soft and I let it under me, and 100,000 people cheered the worst thing I ever did in my life. I have sat with many men in their worst hours, in the wards and out of them, and I will tell you that there is a particular grief in a young man who has sold the one clean thing he had. Holmes let him weep. Then he said, very quietly, "The man who came to you, describe him. Everything. His voice, his hands, his coat, the words he used. You have kept his face in the dark all these weeks. Bring it into the light now, and it may be the saving of you, and of others." He gave a name, Mr. Peel, Josiah Peel. Whether that's his own, I couldn't say. A little dry man, older, with a soft London voice and cold hands. I remember the cold of his hand when he gave me the money. A tout, a whisperer, the sort that hangs about the edges of the game. He wasn't the master of it, sir. I knew that, even then. He was frightened himself, under the pleasantness. He kept saying, "They, the gentlemen wish, the gentlemen are grateful," as if there was someone behind him he daren't cross. He never named them, but once, when I asked him straight who the money came from, he laughed, this dry little laugh, and he said, "It comes from a place as black as your soul will be when you've earned it." And he said a word I didn't understand. He said, "You may call the paymaster Sable, lad, for all the good the name will do you." Sable. There it was again, out of the mouth of a broken boy in a cheap room. The phantom fixer, the black door. The go-between Peel had spoken it as the name of the man above him, the paymaster, the one he feared. "Where do we find Josiah Peel?" said Holmes, and there was an urgency in him now that I had not heard before. "He drinks at the Black Ferry, down by the river at Blackfriars," said Tanner. "Or he did. I was to go there if ever I needed to reach him, but never to the same corner twice." He looked up, hunted. "Am I to be taken up, sir? I'll not run. I've thought these 3 weeks I'd sooner be taken up than go on like this. Only my mother, if it comes out what I did, it'll kill her surer than losing the house." "You will not run," said Holmes, "and you will not speak of this to a living soul, and you will stay in this room until I send for you. What becomes of you is not for me to decide, Wilfred. That is the law's affair and your conscience's. But I will tell you this. The men who used your father's debt to buy your shame are worse than you by a distance you cannot imagine, and if my telling the truth would hang a frightened boy to shield them, I would sooner cut out my tongue. Sit tight, trust me a little longer, and eat something, for pity's sake. A corpse is no use to justice or to his mother." Outside, Holmes was all fire. "Do you see how it stacks, Watson? Peel buys the boy. Sable pays Peel. Sable lays the ruinous bet through Vane's own house. And Sable, I would now wager my own life, is the neat and grieving gentleman who sat with us this morning and wept for his dead partner and described a goal he never saw. But Tanner's word will not hang Finch, for Tanner never saw the paymaster's face, and a name whispered in a dark corner is smoke. Peel is the link. Peel took the money from the master's own hand. Peel can put a face to Sable. We must reach Peel before, oh, he stopped dead on the wet pavement, before the master does. "You think Finch will kill the go-between?" I said. "I think," said Holmes grimly, "that we told Aldous Finch, by clearing Corbett in the public papers, that his tidy story had come undone. I think a careful man in that position sits down at once and asks himself, what is the one loose thread that could put a rope round my neck? And I think the answer he arrives at is a frightened little tout named Peel, who knows the paymaster's face, and drinks where anyone might find him, and would sell that face to the police the moment his own neck was in danger. He was already hailing a cab. We have perhaps been a day too clever, Watson. In cornering the truth, we may have signed a man's death warrant. To the river, to the Black Ferry, and pray we are not too late, though I fear in my bones that we are. The Black Ferry was the kind of house where no one meets your eye, and every man is watching you in the mirror behind the bottles. We came into it out of the fog, and the low murmur died, and a dozen faces turned away at once. Holmes went straight to the landlord, a vast silent man polishing a glass that would never be clean, and asked for Josiah Peel. "Peel," said the landlord, and something moved behind his eyes, wariness or fear. "You've missed him. He was here, an hour gone, jumpy as a cat, drinking fast, kept looking at the door. Then a lad came in with a message for him, a folded paper, and Peel read it, and went the colour of that mud out there, and he threw down his drink and went out the river door in a hurry. Owed me for 3 gins and all." He set down the glass. "If you find him, you can tell him so." "A folded paper," said Holmes, very quiet. "Watson, we have heard of a folded paper before, a message brought to a frightened man by a boy, and the man goes out white into the dark, and is not seen alive again." He turned to the landlord. "Which door? Show me. Now, man, there may be a life in it." We went down the river stairs, into the reek of the low tide, Holmes with his lantern held high, and the mud sucked at our boots, and the fog lay on the water like a lid. And there, 20 yards along the foreshore, where a broken jetty ran out into the dark, we found what we had feared to find, Josiah Peel lay face down in the mud at the lip of the tide, his legs in the water, his little dry body already half claimed by the river. We turned him. He was dead. He had been dead, I judged, less than an hour. Drowned, I said, and I corrected myself the moment I saw what Holmes's lantern had already found, for I have learned to. No, drowned, but not by the river's will. Look at his collar, Holmes, and the back of his neck. He was held. Someone put a knee between his shoulders and a hand on the back of his head and pushed his face into 6 inches of water and held it there while he drowned, in the mud, in the fog, where his struggling would only make him sink the faster, and then let the tide have him, to say he fell in drunk. His pockets are turned out, do you see? Emptied, exactly as Vane's were. The same hand, said Holmes, rising, mud to the elbow, his face like stone. The same tidy mind. Empty the pockets, blame the river or the crush, and let the world write it down as chance. He killed Vane in the roar of a crowd and Peel in the silence of the fog, and he chose each place as carefully as a man chooses a chessboard. Vane needed 100,000 witnesses to be blind. Peel needed only the low tide and no witnesses at all. He knew Peel drank here. He knew Peel could name him. He sent the folded paper, some word Peel dared not refuse. Come to the stairs, bring what you have, or the gentleman will hear you have been talking. And Peel came, poor frightened rat, because a rat that has taken the cat's money cannot say no to the cat. And here he died for knowing a face. Holmes went through the dead man's clothes with quick fingers before the tide could take more of him, and the emptied pockets gave us nothing, as they were meant to give us nothing. But Holmes, who never trusted a pocket, ran his fingers along the seams and the lining and the band of the hat that had rolled clear onto a stone, and it was in the hat, tucked up under the sweatband, where a careful, frightened man might hide a thing he could not bear to carry openly, that he found the folded paper itself. Peel had kept the summons. It was brief, and it was in capital letters, plainly disguised, and it said only this: the stairs below the ferry. 10 o'clock. Bring every scrap that bears on the palace business, and you will be paid what you are owed and more, and we are quits. Tell no one. It was not signed, but at the foot, small, almost an afterthought, almost a taunt, was a single word: Sable. He signs it, I said, amazed. He signs his own summons to murder. He signs it Sable, said Holmes, which is to say, he signs it darkness. He signs it nothing. It is a name that points nowhere and everywhere. Do you not see the whole design of it now, Watson? From the first, this man has built himself a villain out of air. H. Sable lays the bet. H. Sable pays the tout. H. Sable writes the murderous note. Sable, Sable, Sable. In every dark corner of the case, a bogey with no face, so that when at last the police cry murder, they will hunt a phantom through every empty office in London until the trail goes cold and the file is closed. He has invented a man to hang, and the beauty of it is that the man does not exist, and so can never be caught, and so the case can never end, and so the real murderer walks free forever behind a name that means black. Holmes folded the note away. It is the cleverest thing I have come against in years. And it has one flaw, and the flaw is this: a phantom cannot describe a goal. A phantom did not sit in a counting house this morning and tell me, in his own grieving voice, a lie about a header. Sable is smoke. But Aldous Finch is a man, and he has made 2 mistakes, and I hold them both. It was then that I saw the figure. A man stood at the top of the river stairs, above us in the fog, quite still, watching. When Holmes's lantern swung toward him, he turned and was gone into the mist, and by the time we had scrambled up the slimed stairs, the street was empty, and the fog gave us nothing. "Did you see him?" I said, breathless. "Was it Finch?" "I could not swear to it," said Holmes. A tall man, or a short man made tall by the fog, but not, I think, our tidy Finch, who is neither tall nor given to lurking at murder scenes he has already left. No, that was another player, Watson, and I think I can name him, for there is one man besides ourselves who has been asking dangerous questions about the palace business up and down this river all week, and asking them for a story. He set off toward the lights. Thomas Wren, the journalist, Miss Vane's forbidden young man, who was courting her against her father's will, and who has been sniffing at the edges of this fix like a terrier. He is either the bravest fool in London or something worse, and I mean to know which before the night is out. Lestrade came at last, summoned by a constable Holmes had sent running, and stood over the second body in the mud, and was, for once, entirely silent. 2 men dead, both connected to the final, both robbed, so to say, and both left for chance to explain. Even Lestrade could no longer call it a thief in the crowd. "All right, Mr. Holmes," he said heavily. "All right, it is not a chance robbery. I grant you that. You have a notion, I can see it on you. Who is it? Give me a name, and I will have him before dawn." "If I give you a name tonight," said Holmes, "you will arrest a respectable man of business on the word of a burnt letter and a dead boy's memory, and a clever counsel will have him home for his breakfast, and he will destroy every scrap that remains and vanish behind his phantom, and I shall have hanged the truth instead of the man. No, Lestrade, give me 2 days. Let him believe he is winning. Let him think his sable has done its work, and the case is drowning with poor Peel here in the mud. And in 2 days I will give you not a name, but a proof, laid out so that no counsel on earth can shake it, and you may make your arrest before witnesses who will remember it all their lives." He looked out at the black river. "He has killed twice to build a wall of smoke. Now we shall let him think the smoke has held, and then we shall blow it away in a single breath and let all London see what has been standing behind it all along." We ran Thomas Wren to ground that same night in the offices of the halfpenny paper he wrote for, and I will tell you at once, so that you are not led as I was, that Thomas Wren did not kill anyone. But for an hour I was sure he had, and Holmes let me stay sure, because a mistake honestly made is a lesson better than any lecture. Wren was in love with Cordelia Vane, and her father had forbidden it, called him a penniless scribbler, threatened to horsewhip him from the door. That gave him a motive, and he had been at the palace, and he had been at the river tonight, the watching figure in the fog. When Holmes named it, Wren went white, then red. Then, being young and honest under the bluster, he told the truth. "Yes, I was at the river. Yes, I have been chasing this for a fortnight. Not for Cordelia. Well, for Cordelia, but not the way you mean." He shoved a sheaf of notes across the desk. "I am a journalist, Mr. Holmes, and I stumbled on the story of my life. The final was fixed. I could smell it. I have been tracking the money and the whispers, and I found Peel, and I have been trying for a week to make the frightened little wretch talk to me. Tonight I followed him to the ferry, hoping to catch him alone, and I saw you go down to the foreshore, and I saw the lanterns, and I knew he was dead, and I ran, because a reporter found standing over a fresh corpse he has been chasing is a reporter who hangs. That is the whole of it. I never touched Vane. I was on the press bench on the touchline for the entire match, in full view of 40 other pressmen, from the first whistle to the last. Ask any of them. My paper printed my report of the goal within the hour." Holmes read Wren's printed account of the goal, and I saw the faintest satisfaction cross his face, for there, in cold newsprint, written by a man who had watched from the touchline within the hour, was the goal exactly as we had seen it. A low shot, deflected off a defender's heel, creeping beneath the goalkeeper's body along the wet ground. No header, no soaring forward. The whole watching press of England had seen the same low, ugly, crawling goal. Only one man in London, it seemed, remembered a beautiful header, and that man had told it to Sherlock Holmes over a ledger with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Wren," said Holmes, "you are cleared of everything but ambition, and I shall not hang a man for that, or half Fleet Street would swing. But hear me. If you print one word of this fix, or this murder, before I give you leave, you will warn the killer and cost more lives, perhaps Miss Vane's own, for she is closer to him than she knows. Sit on your story of a lifetime for 2 days. Do that, and when the end comes, I will see that you, and only you, are in the room to write it. Betray me, and I will see you get nothing but the view from the street." Wren, who wanted Cordelia and wanted his story, and was not, at bottom, a bad young man, gave his word. He kept it. So by the grey of morning we had cleared them, one by one, all the loud and likely men. Ned Corbett, who had shouted his hatred in the street, lifted off his feet by joy at the far end of the ground. Thomas Wren, the forbidden suitor, in full view of 40 pressmen on the touchline, and Silas Grime, the rival bookmaker, whom Holmes disposed of in a single morning call. Grime hated Vane, made no secret of it, and gloried openly in his death. But Grime, it transpired, had stood in his own betting ring in the Strand for the whole of Saturday, taking money, hand over fist, in front of 200 customers, for a bookmaker does not close his shop on the biggest betting day of the year to go and murder a rival. "I'd have danced on his grave, and I'll dance on it yet," Grime told us cheerfully, "but I'll not swing for the pleasure, and I was in plain sight of half of London when the old crook got his. Ask the 200 fools I fleeced." We asked. He had been. Grime was a brute and a boor, but he was no murderer. And so, as Holmes had promised at the very first, we were left with the kindest man of all. Every loud and hating man had an alibi carved in the sight of hundreds. Only the quiet, grieving, helpful partner had no alibi at all for the 1 minute that mattered, though he had built one so cleverly that no one had thought to doubt it. "Consider his alibi, Watson," said Holmes, spreading his long fingers as we sat over a late breakfast neither of us wanted. "He does not claim to have been in some far corner in the sight of thousands. He is too clever for that, for such alibis can be broken. He claims something much softer. He says he stepped down from the stand, found Vane gone, took a glass of soda water in the refreshment room, and returned to his seat just in time to see the goal. Every part of it is small, private, unwitnessed, and impossible to disprove, save one." He held up a single finger. "Save that he could not resist telling me what the goal looked like. A man who truly returned to his seat and saw the goal would describe the low, crawling, deflected shot that 100,000 people and 40 pressmen saw. Finch described a soaring header. He was not in his seat. He was below, in the passage, with his hands around his partner's throat, and when he came to invent his return, his imagination gave him the kind of glorious goal a final ought to have, and not the ugly little goal it did have. He painted the picture a guilty man paints, the picture of the thing he did not see." "But Holmes," I said, "a jury will not hang a man because he misremembered a football goal. Any honest man might muddle it in the excitement. You said yourself it is not proof." "Alone, no," said Holmes. "A clever counsel will say the poor grieving man was distracted, confused, spoke loosely, and the counsel will be believed, for it is a small thing, a single wrong word. That is exactly why I have said nothing, and shall say nothing, until I can set that single wrong word inside a wall of other facts, so solid that the jury sees not a slip of memory, but a lie, deliberate, necessary, and deadly. One brick is nothing. I am building a wall. And the next brick, Watson, is the money. For I still do not know why a partner of 20 years, rich, trusted, and safe, should suddenly murder the man who made him. And until I know the why, I do not truly have him. Men do not do murder from tidiness. There is a hunger under this somewhere. Let us go and find it in the books. It took us the better part of a night, and it was Cordelia Vane who unlocked it for us, for she brought Holmes not the firm's public books, which Finch kept, and which balanced beautifully, but her father's own private ledger, the one he had kept in his own hand in a locked drawer, and which she had found when she went through his things. And there, when Holmes laid the two side by side, the truth of it came up out of the columns like a body out of a river. For 3 years, Aldous Finch had been quietly ruining himself. He had speculated, secretly, in mines and in railways and in schemes that failed, and to cover his losses he had begun, a little at a time, to borrow from the firm against Vane's knowledge, moving money in ways that the public books hid, but that Vane, who missed nothing in the end, had started to trace in his private one. In the last month of his life, Edmund Vane had written, in his own hand, a single line that Holmes read aloud in the silent office, and that I have never forgotten. The line read, "A is into me for 11,000 and lying about it. God help him, and God help me, for I have loved him like a son, but the book does not lie, and I must have it out with him before the final." "There it is," said Holmes softly. "The hunger, the fear, and the reason." Finch had bled the firm near to death to feed his losses, and Vane had found the wound, and meant to have it out with him. Discovery meant ruin, prison, disgrace, the end of everything. But Finch, being Finch, did not simply run or beg. He built a machine. He would fix the final, lay a fortune on the long shot through his phantom sable, and rob the estate of £100,000, enough to cover his theft 10 times over and set himself up a rich man. And the one man who could stop him, who had already half found him out, who meant to have it out with him before the final, that man he would strangle in the roar of the crowd on the very day the machine paid out. Holmes looked at Cordelia, pale and stricken in the lamplight. "Your father meant to confront his partner before the final, Miss Vane. I fear he did confront him, and I fear that folded note that called him down into the dark was your father's own last hope of setting it right, answered by the man he had loved, like a son, with a pair of thumbs against his throat." Holmes had the why now and the man, but he would not move until he had the how proven to the very inch. And so the following afternoon we returned to the empty palace, the two of us alone, with the groundsman's leave and a stopwatch, to walk the road that Aldous Finch had walked, while 100,000 people watched a football. Holmes is never so happy as when he is reducing a mystery to a matter of feet and seconds, and he went about it that grey afternoon with the quiet joy of a man doing a sum he already knows will come out right. We began in the members' stand, at the very seats we ourselves had occupied. Holmes pressed the stopwatch and went down the wooden stair, as Finch had gone, down into the passage where the day's receipts had been kept, along the low, close corridor, to the spot where Vane had died, which was no more than 40 paces from the foot of the stair. He stood on the spot a moment, and mimed the thing without any relish, the seizing, the throttling, the laying out, the emptying of the pockets, the tearing of the watch from its chain, then back along the corridor, up the stair, and into the seat, and he pressed the watch again and turned its face to me. 6 minutes, he said. 6 minutes, Watson, from seat to seat, with a murder and a staged robbery in the middle of it, done without hurry, by a man who knew every foot of the ground. And how long was Finch absent from his seat? By his own telling. He went down some minutes after Vane, waited in the passage, took a glass of soda water in the refreshment room, and returned as the goal went in. By the most generous reckoning, he was gone the better part of a quarter of an hour. 6 minutes to do the deed. 9 minutes and more, unaccounted for, unwitnessed, in his own account of himself. He gave himself far more time than ever he needed, and he gave it to himself in the one part of the story that no living soul could check, the lonely glass of soda water that no waiter will ever remember pouring. We stood a while in that silent passage where the roar had been, and Holmes looked up at the empty boards over our heads. "Stand here in the quiet, and you cannot believe a man could be killed in such a place unheard," he said. "But fill that stand above us with 100,000 throats at the instant of the winning goal, and this passage becomes the most private room in England." He could have fired a pistol down here, and no soul above would have turned a head. That is what he bought when he fixed the match. Not only the money, he bought the exact moment of the loudest sound in the whole country, and he spent it on a murder. He timed a man's death to a goal, and in timing it so perfectly, he tied the death to the goal forever, so that when I learned he did not know how that goal was scored, I knew past doubting that he had not been in his seat to see the very thing he had killed by. The cleverness of it is the thread that unpicks it. It is always so with these men, Watson. The perfect crime leaves a perfect print. "I have the why and the how and the man," said Holmes, "and I have not one shred that a court will hang him on, which is the particular misery of the clever criminal. The boots, the goal, the handwriting, the ledger, each is a whisper, and a jury wants a shout, so I shall make him shout. I shall make Aldous Finch do a thing so black and so undeniable that a dozen honest witnesses will see his guilt with their own eyes, and never afterward doubt it. And to make him do it, I shall frighten him with the one thing he cannot bear, his partner's private ledger, the book that traces his theft, the book he does not know we have already read." The bait was simple, and it was cruel. Through Cordelia, in a way that would surely reach Finch, Holmes let it be known that her father's private papers had been found, that they were locked in the great safe in the counting-house, and that the coroner had ordered them sealed and untouched, until the inquest 3 days hence, when they would be opened and read into the record before the court. "He will not be able to endure it," said Holmes. "He knows better than any man what is in that book, for he has spent 3 years dreading exactly those columns. He knows that if Vane's private ledger is read at an inquest, the story of his theft will stand up in open court, and with it the whole edifice of his motive. Sable can survive many things, but Sable cannot survive Vane's own hand, naming the £11,000. He must have that book. He must burn it before the inquest, and he has 3 nights to do it, and his own keys to the office, and the arrogance of a man who has killed twice, and been believed each time. He will come, and we shall be waiting in the dark." And so, on the second night, we lay hidden in the offices of Vane and Finch, in the dark, and we waited. I have kept many such watches with Holmes, and I have never grown used to the strain of them, the ache of stillness, the way the small sounds of an empty building grow into monsters. A clock ticked in the outer office. The gas was off, and the only light was the sick amber of a street lamp through the fog, laid in long bars across the floor. Somewhere a floorboard settled with a crack like a shot, and my heart near stopped. Beside me, Holmes was as still as the dead. Midnight came and passed, and I began to think the fish had smelled the hook. Then, at some black hour past 1, we heard it. A key in the street door turned with great care, the soft click of a latch, and then footsteps, slow, deliberate, familiar, crossing the outer office toward the manager's room, and a small circle of light swinging low before them from a shaded lantern. It was Finch. He set his lantern on the desk, and he took from his pocket a ring of keys, and here was the thing that told the tale even before he opened it, for the great safe had 2 locks, one that Vane had kept, one that Finch kept, and no honest partner should have had the means to open both alone in the dark. But Finch had both. He had, at some point, taken a copy of the dead man's key. He knelt, and he worked the first lock, and then the second, and the heavy door swung open, and he began, with quick gloved hands, to lift out the ledgers and lay them on the floor and turn to the private book he had come to burn. He found the book, he found the page. I saw his shoulders drop, that terrible relief of a cornered man who thinks he has reached the last lock of his cage. He lifted the lantern's glass to bring the flame to the paper. And Sherlock Holmes said, out of the darkness, in a voice as pleasant as if we sat at breakfast, "I should not burn that, Mr. Finch. It is evidence in a murder, and Inspector Lestrade is standing at your left hand. I will grant Aldous Finch this. He did not cry out, and he did not run, and he did not drop the book. He set down the lantern, and he closed the ledger with great care, and he rose to his feet and faced us, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and reasonable and almost warm, and it was the most chilling thing I heard in the whole affair. Mr. Holmes, gentlemen, Inspector, I fear this looks a great deal worse than it is." He spread his hands, the picture of pained honesty. "I am the surviving partner of this firm. These are the firm's confidential books, containing the private affairs of 1,000 clients, matters of the utmost delicacy. I learned that the coroner meant to throw them open at a public inquest, to be pored over by every gossip and journalist in London, and I came, yes, in the night, to remove the most sensitive of them and keep them safe and private, as is my plain duty to those clients, and to my dead friend's good name. It is irregular, I confess it. It is not criminal. I have keys to my own firm's safe, which is no crime, and I have burned nothing." He looked at Holmes almost with reproach. "You have laid a trap for an honest man doing an awkward duty, and dressed it up as the capture of a villain. It will not survive daylight, sir. I promise you it will not." And do you know, for a moment it worked. I saw the doubt cross Lestrade's heavy face, for every word of it was plausible, and every word of it was a lie, and Finch knew as he spoke that a good counsel could make a jury believe it, an anxious partner protecting confidential papers, no more. He had talked his way out of a robbery and 2 murders already, by being reasonable. He had every reason to believe he could talk his way out of this. But Holmes only smiled, and took the ledger from him, unresisting, and turned to the page Finch had opened, and read aloud, quietly, into the frozen room, Edmund Vane's own words. "A is into me for 11,000 and lying about it. I must have it out with him before the final." And then Holmes closed the book and looked at Finch and said, "The confidential affairs of 1,000 clients, Mr. Finch, or the confession, in your dead partner's hand, of the £11,000 you stole, and the reason you had to silence him before he could have it out with you. Which is it you came to burn at 1 o'clock in the morning with your own copy of a dead man's key? I think we both know, but you are right about one thing. This alone will not hang you, and so I shall not arrest you tonight." "You will not?" said Finch, and for the first time a thread of unease showed through the reasonable voice. "No," said Holmes pleasantly, "for I want it done properly, before witnesses, in the full light, where no counsel can whisper it away. I want the truth of this, laid out where it happened, and I want you present to hear every word of it, and I want the chance for you to explain yourself, which no honest man could refuse, and no clever one dare. So here is my invitation, Mr. Finch, and you will find you cannot decline it. Tomorrow at dusk we shall all go down to the Crystal Palace, to the very stand and the very passage where Edmund Vane died. Miss Vane will be there, and Inspector Lestrade, and 1 or 2 others who have a stake in the truth, and I shall explain before them all exactly how a man was murdered in front of 100,000 witnesses. You will come, because a man who has done nothing wrong is eager to be cleared before the daughter of his old friend. And if you do not come, every soul in that room will know why." He handed the ledger to Lestrade. "Guard this with your life, Inspector. And Mr. Finch, do sleep well. It may be some time before you sleep easy again." "Of course I shall come," said Finch, and the tidy smile was back, though it did not reach his eyes now. "I have nothing to hide, and everything to see cleared. Until tomorrow then, Mr. Holmes, at the palace." "I confess I am curious to hear this famous explanation. I only fear you will disappoint your audience, for you are chasing a phantom named Sable, and phantoms, sir, do not stand in the dock." He took up his hat and bowed to us each in turn, courteous to the last, and walked out between the constables into the fog, as though he had won. "He thinks he has beaten us again," I said. "He is walking away, Holmes. You had him at the safe, and you let him walk." "I let him walk to the Crystal Palace," said Holmes, "which is the last free walk that man will ever take. Tonight I proved to myself what I already knew. Tomorrow, Watson, before his victim's own daughter, on the very spot where he did it, I shall prove it to the world, and I shall do it with his own two small mistakes, the goal he never saw and the mud he never trod. He has spent this whole affair building a phantom to hang in his place. Tomorrow I shall stand that phantom up in front of everyone and pull off its black hood and show them all the tidy, grieving, reasonable face that has been hiding underneath from the very first hour. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish it, where it began, in the dark under the stands, with the ghost of 100,000 voices for our jury." We came back to the Crystal Palace at dusk, and it was a haunted place. Where 100,000 had roared, there was now only the wind moving in the empty stands, and the creak of the great timbers cooling, and the fog coming up off the lake to walk among the iron pillars. The groundsman lit the lanterns in the passage below the members' stand, the very passage where Vane had died, and there, in that low, close space under the boards, Holmes had gathered his small and silent audience. Cordelia Vane was there, straight-backed and white, Lestrade, with a constable at the passage mouth, Thomas Wren, notebook ready, keeping his promise and getting his story, and, brought quietly by Holmes's arrangement and standing wretched in the shadows, young Wilfred Tanner, the goalkeeper, and Aldous Finch, hat in hand, calm, courteous, the picture of a man who has come to help clear up a sad misunderstanding. "Thank you all for coming," said Holmes, "to the place where Edmund Vane was murdered. I say murdered, and I say it here, on the spot, because I mean to show you tonight not only that it was murder, but the hand that did it, and I mean to show it so plainly that when I have finished, not one of you will doubt it for the rest of your lives." He turned, mild as milk. "Mr. Finch, you were closest to the dead man of anyone here, his partner of 20 years. I wonder if you would help me by telling this company, in your own words, what you saw of the great goal, the goal that Camberwell scored, the goal at whose very moment your friend was dying beneath our feet. You told me once, tell them." And Finch, who did not know that he was putting his own head in the noose, told it again, and told it more fully this time, for he was among a wider audience, and the actor in him could not resist. "It was a thing of beauty in the midst of tragedy," he said gravely. I had just returned to my seat. The Camberwell forward rose above the whole Brackenmore defence and headed the ball down and into the corner of the net, a magnificent header, and the ground erupted as I have never heard a ground erupt. I shall carry the sight of it to my grave. To think that as that lovely goal flew in, poor Edmund lay dead below. He bowed his head. I saw it as clear as I see you now, Mr. Holmes. You saw it as clear as you see me now, Holmes repeated softly. Wilfred, you were the goalkeeper. The ball went past you into the net. Tell this company, plainly, how the goal was scored. Was it a header, soaring into the corner? Tanner's voice cracked, but it came clear in the still passage. No, sir, there wasn't a header in it. It was a low shot from 20 yards, a poor one, off the Camberwell lad's boot along the ground. It clipped Harker's heel and deflected and came at me low and slow across the mud. It never left the ground, sir. It rolled under me, under my body, into the net. There was no man rising, no header, nothing in the air at all. It crawled in along the grass. Ask anyone who was there. Ask the 100,000. There was never a header. Holmes drew from his coat the halfpenny paper and Wren's own account written within the hour, and he read it aloud, the low shot, the deflection off the heel, the ball creeping under the keeper's body along the wet ground, and he laid beside it the great press photograph of the goal, in which no man is in the air at all, and the ball is a low grey blur along the mud. 100,000 people saw this goal, said Holmes. 40 pressmen on the touchline saw it and printed it within the hour. The goalkeeper it went under has just described it to you. It was a low, deflected, crawling shot along the ground, and there was no header in it, and there never could have been, for it never rose an inch. Every soul who saw that goal remembers a ball on the ground. He turned to Finch, and his voice did not rise, and that was the terrible thing. Only you, Mr. Finch, remember a soaring header. 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 And there is only one reason a man invents a goal instead of remembering it, because he was not there to see it. Because at the moment that ball crawled under that boy and 100,000 people rose to their feet, you were not in your seat at all. You were here, in this passage, with your hands around your partner's throat. And when you came, afterward, to invent the return to your seat that would give you your alibi, you painted the goal a final ought to have, the glorious header of a schoolboy's dream, and not the ugly little goal it truly was. You described the crime by describing a thing you never saw. Finch wet his lips, and his voice, when it came, had lost a little of its warmth but none of its cunning. A slip of memory, he said. An old man, grieving, confused in the excitement of a terrible day, muddles the manner of a goal he half glimpsed. You would hang me on a muddle, Mr. Holmes. Any man here might misremember a goal. It is nothing. It proves nothing. You are right, said Holmes. Alone, it is a muddle, and a jury would forgive it. So let us not leave it alone. Let us set beside it the matter of the mud. He crouched and touched the beaten floor of the passage. When Edmund Vane's body was found, his boots were dry. The dirt on them was the pale, dry dust of this ground as it lay in the afternoon, before the match ended. Yet the floor of this passage, after the final whistle, was black soup, churned by 100,000 feet leaving the ground. Every man who came down here in that flood carried the wet black mud to his ankles. My boots did. Dr. Watson's did. But Edmund Vane's boots were dry, which is impossible, unless Edmund Vane walked down into this passage before the crowd left, before the floor was churned, while it was still dry, that is to say, during the match. He came down here during the match, and he never walked out, because he was dead before the whistle blew, dead before the flood came, lying here in the dark with dry boots, while 100,000 muddy feet tramped out over his head. Holmes rose. Dr. Watson, a medical man, set the time of death by the cooling of the body at very near the moment of the goal. The dry boots prove he died during the match and not after. The two facts lock together like a key in a ward. Edmund Vane died at the height of the match, in the roar, and every account that has him robbed in the crush afterward is a lie built to hide the hour of his death. And who first spoke that lie to me? Who came white-faced up the stair and said a thief had killed him in the crowd? You did, Mr. Finch. The robbery, Holmes went on, relentless now, quiet as the fog, was staged. The watch and the purse, taken not by a thief, but by the murderer, to make us say the word robbery and look no further. But a thief who empties a man's pockets in the dark takes everything of value. He does not sew a betting counterfoil for a great sum back into the coat lining. That counterfoil was left because the killer never knew it was there, hidden where Vane hid the things he did not trust even to a drawer. And what name was on it? H. Sable. The same name on the note that lured Josiah Peel to his death in the river mud 2 nights ago, with his pockets emptied in the very same fashion, by the very same tidy hand. Sable, Sable, Sable. A phantom you built out of the Herald's word for black. A villain with no face. To be hunted forever through empty offices while you walked free. It was beautifully done, Mr. Finch. But a phantom did not copy a dead man's safe key. A phantom did not speculate away £11,000 of the firm's money in failing mines. A phantom did not come to this passage during the match, while his partner waited to have it out with him over the theft. And a phantom, above all, cannot misremember a goal, because a phantom was never in the members' stand at all. Only a man can make that mistake. Only you. There is one more thing I must show this company, Holmes went on, for it is the neatest cruelty in the whole design, and Miss Vane should hear it from me and not read it first in a court of law. You will all remember how Edmund Vane came to be in this passage at all. A steward carried him a folded note in the middle of the match, and he read it, and the colour went out of his face, and he rose and came down here alone. I have found that steward. He was given the note, and a shilling for his trouble, by a neat grey gentleman below the stand, and told to carry it up to Mr. Vane, and say only that it was urgent. The note itself is burned. But I do not need it, for I hold its brother in my pocket. 2 nights ago, a folded note called Josiah Peel to the river stairs, signed Sable, and Peel went and drowned in the mud. On the day of the final, a folded note called Edmund Vane down into this passage, and he went and died in the roar. The same trick, the same tidy hand, the same folded paper, carried by a frightened messenger to a frightened man. Finch summoned his partner to a private word in the one place, and at the one moment where a private word could be made a murder. He wrote some line, in the language of an honest reckoning, "Come down, and we will settle it quietly. No need for the police, no need to shame the firm." And Edmund Vane, who had loved this man like a son, and who wanted above all things on this earth not to see him stand in a dock, came down alone, unarmed, trusting, to settle it like men. That trust is what killed him. Finch did not merely murder his partner, he took the man's own decency, his wish to spare the friend who had robbed him, and he used it as the bait upon the hook. I heard Cordelia Vane draw one long breath in the lantern light, and I did not look at her, for some griefs ought not to be watched. Her father had gone down that stair, carrying his own murder in his pocket, folded small, written in the hand of the man he had meant to forgive. He laid them out, one by one, in the lantern light, the counterfoil in Sable's name, sewn in the dead man's coat, the scrap of the burnt letter from the empty office, in Finch's own clerk's hand, that Holmes had matched. The murderous note to Peel, signed Sable. Vane's private ledger, in the dead man's hand, naming the £11,000, and the reckoning meant for before the final. And Wilfred Tanner's confession that the fix had been arranged by a go-between who called his paymaster Sable. Each alone a whisper. Together, laid out under that swinging lantern in the passage where the man had died, they were a wall no council on earth could pull down, and every face in that low, dark place had turned to Aldous Finch, and every face had the same thing written on it, and the thing was certainty. For a long moment Finch said nothing. The fog moved in the passage. A timber creaked overhead, and then the tidy, reasonable voice came one last time, and it had changed, gone flat and cold and stripped of all its warmth. And it was, I think, the true voice at last, the one that had been under all the others from the beginning. "He was going to ruin me," said Finch quietly. 20 years I built that house with him, and I made one bad year, one string of bad years, and I borrowed to cover it, meaning to put it back, always meaning to put it back, and he found it. He called me into his study 3 weeks ago with that private book open on the desk, and he looked at me the way you look at a dog that has bitten you, and he said, "I have loved you like a son, Aldous, and you have robbed me, and we will settle it after the final, man to man, and God help you if you cannot make it right." God help me, as if his help were worth a farthing. The flat voice did not rise, so I made it right my own way. I found the boy with the debt, and Peel to carry the money, and I built Sable to take the blame, and I laid the firm's ruin on Camberwell, and I sent Edmund the note to come down and settle it like men. And I settled it, in the raw. It was the easiest thing in the world. 100,000 people singing, and my hands on his throat, and no one to hear, and I thought, no one will ever hear. I thought I had thought of everything. His eyes went to Holmes, and there was something almost like wonder in them, and something like hate. And I had thought of everything but a goal. You have hanged me with a football, Mr. Holmes. I never even looked at the wretched match. You looked at everything except the one thing every honest man in that ground was looking at, said Holmes. That has always been the way of your sort. You are so busy watching the crowd that you forget to watch the game, and it is the game that hangs you in the end. Inspector, he is yours. The charge is the willful murder of Edmund Vane and of Josiah Peel, and I will stand up in any court in England and put the goal and the boots and the ledger and his own copied key before the jury, and there is not a counsel living who will talk his way out of all four at once. Cordelia Vane came forward then, slowly, and stood before the man who had held her hand the night her father died and wept with her and promised to spend his last penny hanging the murderer. She did not strike him. She only looked at him a long time, and then she said, in a voice quite steady, "You sat in our drawing-room. You cried. You called him your dearest friend." And Finch, who had answered Sherlock Holmes without flinching, could not meet her eyes, and looked at the floor and said nothing at all. That silence, I think, was the only honest thing he did in the whole of that terrible affair. Aldous Finch was tried that autumn, and Holmes was as good as his word. He put the goal before the jury, and the boots, and the copied key, and the private ledger in the dead man's hand, and the burnt letter matched to Finch's own, and the murderous note to Peel, and it took the 12 men less than an hour to find him guilty of the murder of Edmund Vane. He was hanged before the year was out, tidy and reasonable to the last, and I am told he asked, on the scaffold, only whether the morning papers had come and what the football results had been. I do not know if that is true. I hope it is not. The others of that strange company found kinder ends. Ned Corbett, the ruined clerk who had shouted his hatred in the rain and very nearly hanged for it, was sought out by Cordelia Vane herself, who could not undo her father's cruelty to him, but could soften it. She gave him work, honest work, in the winding up of the very firm that had broken him, and I am told he did it well, and held his head up in the street again, which is a thing money cannot always buy a man. Thomas Wren got his story, the story of his life, and printed it, and it made his name, and it made him bold enough at last to ask Edmund Vane's daughter to marry him, now that Edmund Vane was not there to horsewhip him from the door. She said yes. Holmes was invited to the wedding and did not go, for he distrusted weddings as he distrusted all events where sentiment ran ahead of sense, but he sent a gift, and would never tell me what it was, and Mrs. Wren wrote him a letter afterward that he kept, which for that unsentimental man was a great deal. There was the boy, last of all, Wilfred Tanner, the goalkeeper, who had sold the one clean thing he had for £90 and his mother's house, and who had wept in a cheap room and helped us bring a murderer down. His part in the fix never came out at the trial. Holmes saw to that. He told me plainly why, and I set it down because it tells you more about my friend than any deduction ever could. The law wanted a murderer, said Holmes, and I gave it the murderer, whole and proven, and the law was satisfied. The law did not need a frightened boy of 20 who let a goal in to save his mother's roof. And if I had thrown Tanner to it, the law would have taken him too, greedily, as the law takes whatever is put before it, and it would have broken him and his mother both, and the world would have been no safer, and justice no better served. Finch made the boy a tool, Watson. I will not finish Finch's work for him. The boy has punished himself harder than any court would dare, and he will go on punishing himself. And one day, perhaps, he will do some brave good thing to set against that half-second in the mud, and be a little free of it. That is between Wilfred Tanner and his own soul, and I am neither, thank God. He paused. I told him to give up the game. A man who has once let a goal in for money should never again stand where he might be tempted. He is apprenticed to his father now, a joiner in Brackenmore. He makes doors and window frames, honest wood, and I think he is glad of it. His mother kept her house. Let that be the end of it. Inspector Lestrade, for his part, took the credit for the arrest, as Lestrade always did, and Holmes let him have it, as Holmes always did, for Holmes cared nothing for credit, and everything for the thing itself. But Lestrade came to Baker Street one evening, alone, and stood awkwardly by the fire, and said, in the manner of a man swallowing something that did not go down easy, "You were right about the mud, Mr. Holmes, and the goal. I would never have seen it. I would have hanged Corbett and slept sound. I don't say it often. I'll not say it twice. But you were right, and a good man would have died, and I'll remember it." And he shook Holmes's hand, which he had never done before, and went out into the night. It was, from Lestrade, an oration. That night, when the fire had burned low, I asked Holmes the thing that had been sitting in me since the passage. "It very nearly worked," I said. "If you had sent your regrets that morning, if we had never gone to the match, Finch would have walked away rich and free behind his phantom, and no one would ever have known a murder had been done at all. Does that not trouble you? How many such men are there, Holmes, who chose their crowd well and are walking free this minute, uncaught, because no one happened to look at the mud on their victim's boots?" Holmes was quiet a long while. "It troubles me more than any case I can name," he said at last. Finch understood a thing most murderers never grasp. He understood that the safest place to do a wicked deed is not the empty room but the crowded one. 10,000 witnesses see nothing, because each trusts the others to see, and afterward each remembers only what he is told to remember. A crowd is a darkness with the lamps left on. Finch hid his murder inside the attention of 100,000 people the way a man hides a leaf in a forest, and he was very nearly right, and there are men, Watson, cleverer and colder than Finch, who have hidden their leaves so well that no forester will ever find them. He turned from the fire. But here is the small comfort, and I hold to it. Finch thought of everything, and everything was not enough. He watched the crowd so closely that he forgot to watch the game, and the game undid him. The cleverest of them always forget one small true thing, because they are so busy with their grand design, and that one small true thing is usually something an ordinary honest man could not have failed to notice. The mud, the goal, the world is saved in the end, not by cleverness, but by the stubbornness of small true facts that will not lie and will not be hidden and wait quietly in the dark to be found. A dead man's dry boots, a goal that crawled along the ground. These do not care how clever the murderer was. They simply are what they are. And that, old friend, is why I shall never be out of work and never quite despair. There were more than 100,000 people at the Crystal Palace that afternoon. Not one of them saw a murder. They saw a low shot creep beneath a diving keeper, and they rose as one creature and roared. And in that roar, a man died quietly beneath their feet, and the sound of his dying was swallowed whole. That was the whole of Aldous Finch's genius. He did not hide from the eyes of the world. He simply chose the one moment when the whole world was looking somewhere else. And he would have got away with it, this quiet and reasonable man, but for two small things he could not hide and did not think to. A dead man's boots, dry in a passage where every other boot was black with mud, and a goal that crawled along the ground, which he described as a soaring header, because he was not there to see it, because he was here, in the dark, with his hands about the throat of the man who had loved him like a son. Two small true facts, waiting quietly to be found. In the end, they always are. Holmes said afterward that it was the finest alibi he ever met. A crowd, a darkness with the lamps left on. And he said that somewhere in London, that very night, another such man was walking free, cleverer and colder than Finch, who had chosen his crowd better and left no goal behind him to give the lie. Whether Holmes ever found that man is a story for another night. And there is another night. There is always another night, and another fog, and another door in Baker Street, and behind it the sharp, cold mind that will not let a small true fact lie hidden in the dark. If you want to know what was written on the black-edged letter that came to Baker Street the morning after Finch was hanged, and the case that Sherlock Holmes said frightened him more than any in his long career, that story is waiting for you now. It is on the screen. Follow the lantern into the next fog, and let Holmes show you one more time how the smallest true thing in the world can bring down the cleverest lie.